The Gorkha's Daughter is a collection of short stories based on the lives of Nepali-speaking people. Uh, there are stories based in Gangtok, Sikkim, my hometown, in Kalimpong, in Darjeeling, in Kathmandu, in Bhutan. Uh, uh, um, I write about my world, about the people I was surrounded by growing up. Uh, there are 8 stories in the book. Uh, I wrote The Gurkha's Daughter because I had nothing to do in my life. I had just quit my job as an advertising executive at the Village Voice in New York. I had traveled around a bit and and the traveling ended. It had to end someday. After about 4 to 5 months of doing nothing, I realized I would have to do something. So I booked a guest house room in Manali and wrote the first story there. After which I moved to Gangtok, my hometown again, so I could write the rest of the stories. Uh, yeah, bits and pieces of it. There are mentions of all these childhood games that little boys and girls play. There are some stories that are set in the 90s, some stories that are set in the 2000s. There are some stories that begin in the 80s and end in the 2000s. So I don't think there is any story that's older than I am there. I'm sure that would have entailed copious amounts of research. There, so yeah, 1980s, 90s, 2000s. So these are very contemporary stories. They're set in my part of the world. They're set in Gangtok, Kalimpong, Darjeeling, Bhutan, Nepal, and all these places. Places I've lived in or frequented as a child, and it seemed a very natural thing to do, to be honest with you. I didn't really want to write about a world that would entail researching for hours and hours and hours. Yes, there were some stories in the book, like there is a story called No Land is Her Land, which is about the Bhutanese refugee situation. And I spent a very, very long time researching it. I made field trips to the refugee camps of Nepal. I went to Bhutan to talk to people there. The first draft of the story read very much like a research paper, it read like an academic paper. It took many, many drafts to get the story right. There were other stories that were already in my head, had been incubating for a very long time, so it was simply a matter of getting them out on paper. I write stories that are character based, of course, uh, and most of my, these things deal with relationships. The stories deal with relationships more than anything else. I haven't started a story writing about the Maoist insurgency in Nepal because I like for these social and political issues not to take away from the actual stories of characters in my book. Oh, of course, there are conflicts throughout. That's I think conflicts are vital in making good stories. Some of them are imagined. Uh, some of them are a mix and match of a cousin with an aunt, with an uncle. Take the idiosyncrasies of a relative, marry them to the stubbornness of an uncle, and juxtapose it with, say, the ability to manipulate people of another relative, and you have a character there. So a lot of it is imaginary, a lot of it is a composite of many different people. Sometimes I wonder if that is the reason the book has been doing so well, because I've written about very esoteric world, a world that had not been written about all that much in English before. Uh, See, at the end of the day, irrespective of how much Nepaliness there is in their stories, people have fights, they are jealous, they fall in love, they have insecurities, they celebrate their successes, they mourn their losses, they mourn the deaths of of people they love. So it all whittles down to basic human emotions. My stories aren't based in the smaller towns of those areas. I have two stories based in Gangtok, one in Darjeeling and one in Kalimpong. Uh, yeah, I think it would be a very good idea to have stories based in the smaller towns too. I think there are some fascinating stories to be written about the smaller towns. The response has been amazingly positive, for which I'm extremely grateful. Yes, the response elsewhere has been great too, but there is something to be said about the response in your hometown being positive. People have remarked about the authenticity of the stories. They've talked about about my unapologetic usage of Nepali words in the stories. I did not want any footnotes in there simply because I wanted the Nepali words to stand by themselves, as I'm proud of those words. So yeah, the response has been wonderful and I'm so grateful for that.